I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
1-800-585-9396.
What's stopping?
Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome again to Call to Communion. This is the program for our non-Catholic brothers and sisters. If you've got a question about the Catholic faith and you just don't know where to turn, you just don't know who you could ask that question of, why not ask us? Here's our phone number, 1-800-585-9396. 1-800-585-9396. You can also text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for the response and then text us your first name and your brief question. Message and data rates may apply. Again, the phone number, 1-800-585-9396. Well, we have Michael McCall as our producer. He is also handling social media today, so he will pass on any questions that we receive from you via Facebook and or YouTube. Matt Gabinski is our phone screener. I'm Tom Price, along with Dr. David Anders.
Tom, how are you today?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
You know, I heard a story. You probably know this already, but I hadn't heard it before. I heard a story about St. Philip Neri this morning that I liked a lot. Apparently, a guy came to him for confession one time and was a real sourpuss. And so for his penance, Philip Neri said, for your penance, go be happy.
That's funny.
Isn't that good?
That's funny. So I've got one for you now. This is something that one of our employees put on Facebook late last night. And I looked at it and I thought, that's more profound than probably a lot of people realize. It was just a one-liner sentence. And it said, why should we, let's see, how did he say it? Why should we lose the tests that God gives us when he's already given us the answers?
Why should we lose the test?
How could we fail the test? How could we fail the test when God's already given us all the answers? Isn't that awesome?
I don't know. It kind of seems like a koan to me. What's the sound of one hand clapping? You know, I'm going to have to chew on that one for a little bit.
Okay, while you're doing that, let's tackle an email here before we get to the phones. Here's one from Randy in St. Louis who says, are we to consider the blesseds with certainty of being in heaven? And what is the difference between them and the fully canonized saints? Also, how should Catholics regard someone who is considered a saint in the Orthodox community but not in Catholicism? For example, Constantine. Thanks, Randy.
Okay, thanks. So, of course, the process of canonization is the highest level of recognition of a person's sanctity, and the Church elevates this person as worthy of veneration and devotion throughout the whole universal Church. Mm-hmm. And along the way, there are different stages in the process. You declare a person to be venerable, you can declare a person to be blessed, and of course, canonization is the highest level. At each of those stages, the Church has marked out somebody as essentially worthy of imitation, of having lived a noble and heroical life, and you can have a local or private devotion to a person, even apart from the public recognition by the Church that this person is, in fact, a saint. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, like my granddad, for instance. My granddad's never going to be a canonized saint in the Catholic Church, but I privately believe him to be in heaven, and it's entirely appropriate for me to ask for his prayers. But it's not appropriate for him to be venerated publicly throughout the universal Church and his veneration promoted as such, by the Holy See.
Okay.
And canonization is just the sort of the highest final stamp of approval in the process that, yes, we know with certainty this person is in heaven, and they should be. Their cult ought to advance throughout the universal Church. The beatification is one step below that, and it's a very strong presumption in favor of their being in heaven and in fact a saint.
Okay, very good. We're going to actually go to the phones a little bit early this time around. Michael says no, yes. Okay. We'll come back. We'll be talking with Tim in Strasburg, Virginia, also Josh in Temple, Texas. And if you have a question for us, here's the phone number, 1-800-585-9396. Our producer says take a second email. Okay, he's He's a slave master here. This is from Anthony, who says, Dr. Anders, I listen to your show quite frequently. I am a Roman Catholic who has not been to Catholic Church in a while. I attend more Anglican services. I have heard from a Catholic priest of Oblates of Mary Immaculate, OMI, of a parish that I used to go to. That priest told me that the Eucharist is like another sacrament of reconciliation that was changed during Vatican II. The Eucharist can offer forgiveness of sin as going to confession. Is this correct? Thank you, and God bless, Anthony.
Thanks, Anthony. Not exactly, not in the way you have framed it. Partaking worthily of the Eucharist does, in fact, atone for sin and mitigates the effect of venial sin. But to go to communion in the Catholic Church in the state of mortal sin does not obtain forgiveness, but rather condemnation. Oh. All right, so we have to be prepared to go to communion, and in fact, that's one of the reasons we have sacramental confession, so that we can be absolved of our mortal sins, return to the state of grace, so that we can receive Holy Communion worthily.
Okay, very good. Now we'll go to a break. All right. When we come back, we'll talk with Tim in Virginia, Josh in Temple, Texas, and we do have two lines open at the moment, 1-800-585-9396, if you have a question for Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion on EWTN.
Sharing the fullness of the Catholic faith. 1-800-585-9396. This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
This is Archbishop Charles J. Chaput.
This is Teresa Tomeo, host of Catholic Connection.
Hello, friends. This is Father Wade Menezes of the Fathers of Mercy for EWTN. A very blessed Advent and happy Advent from all of us here at the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Christ is the answer with Father John Riccardo.
John chapter 11, verses 21 to 26. This is the story of Lazarus. Lazarus has died. Lazarus is one of his best friends. Just before this passage, we hear the news that Martha and Mary send word to Jesus that the one you love is sick. And the next line in the scripture is, now because Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, he stayed where he was. His friend's in need. He can heal. They've seen him heal before. And yet somehow, because he loves him, he stays. And Lazarus dies. And then Jesus shows up 3 days later and is greeted by Martha and Mary, who confront him with the words, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would never have died. Rather applicable for many of us in our lives. We ask the Lord to do one thing because we're certain it is what we think is best, when in fact he has something which far surpasses what we ask for. The challenge is, in waiting for that to happen, we go through very trying times, which oftentimes makes us wonder, does he really care?
Listen to EWTN Radio day or night. Audio on demand brings you your favorite EWTN programs, prayers, and devotionals instantly to you for free. Visit EWTNapps.com and get started today.
Christmas weekend, EWTN and Anathan Theater present a live radio drama adapted from the popular movie It's a Wonderful Life.
I'm in trouble, Mr. Potter. I've got to raise $8,000 immediately.
Oh, so that's what the reporters want to talk to you about?
The reporters?
Yes. There's a man over there from the DA's office, too.
Please help me, Mr. Potter. Help me, please, won't you?
Merry Christmas, George Bailey. Saturday night at 5 Eastern and Sunday night at 7 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
Hey, if you heard that little announcement there just before we came back to the show, that wonderful episode of Merry Christmas, George Bailey. It's a co-production of EWTN and Franciscan University of Steubenville. Actually, they did all the heavy lifting. We're airing it, and we're delighted to air it. It's part of our 48 Hours of Christmas package that we have for you all day Christmas Day and all day Christmas Eve as well. 48 hours of, good golly, masses and musical programs, drama like this one, and A Christmas Carol, the famous, Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge. Anyway, some great programming. Do check it out and go to EWTNradio.net, EWTNradio.net. Find out all about that. If you're ready now, let's get to the phones here at 1-800-585-9396. Tim is listening in Strasburg, Virginia on Radio Christendom. Hey there, Tim. What's on your mind today?
Well, thanks for taking the call. First off, Dr. Anders, I just wanted to thank you because you're such a blessing to the faithful and to the church, and all the EWTN programming is so wonderful. But
thank you so much.
I was hoping maybe you could clarify. I was listening yesterday on your discussion of the working of grace in our lives, and if I understood, I probably missed something, but if I understood it correctly, you said that even the inclination to have faith or to love God or to search for God is a grace from God, and all the good works that we do are also a grace working through us from God. So I guess my question is, and maybe I missed this, is the individual free will and also the idea of justice. If everything is a grace and there's no choosing to follow God or to not follow God, it seems that the question of justice arises why God would pick some and not others. So would you expand on that idea of the free will aspect and the justice aspect?
Sure. So first of all, I think the way you frame the question is a false dichotomy. Either there's free will or we have grace. And the way traditional Catholic theology teaches this is exactly the opposite. There is free will because we have grace. All right? Let me illustrate. Who would you say is freer? Someone who is struggling against a chemical dependency, an addiction, or someone who does not have that addiction? Which one of those people is freer in your mind?
Well, of course, the person that does not have the addiction.
Absolutely, right. And what most chemical dependencies are, right? They begin and essentially consist in a grossly immoderate desire for some form of physical pleasure. All right, whether it be alcohol or amphetamines or depressants or whatever, there's some kind of sensible effect that the drug induces in us that is extremely pleasurable, and we come to be utterly dependent on that, and then to crave it to an extremely immoderate way. That is a good analogy for the way sin works in our life. I mean, the root of sin, the wounds of sin in our nature, things like pride or concupiscence, egotism, malice, sloth, laziness, all of these things are immoderate desires for things that harm us, that draw us away from our true good, okay? And the more we are in the throes of sin, the more we are impeded actually from freely choosing, all right? And I think it's vividly illustrated in the case of somebody who is an addict who is reduced to almost no freedom at all. They are the slave of their addiction. And St. Paul says we can be the slave of our sins. We can be the slave of our lust or the slave of our pride. I certainly have experienced in my own life periods of time when I was so concerned with my pride or my reputation that it seemed like that concern overwhelmed everything else in my life, and all I wanted to do was make sure that people thought well of me. And I've seen that in others. I remember going to a party one time and meeting some fellow for the first time, and it was like, "Hi, how are you? Oh, my name's Joe Blow. Here's my list of accomplishments." And it was like, this guy has no capacity to form friendships because he's so obsessively concerned with his own reputation.
Yeah.
Sin wounds us like that, destroys our freedom. What grace does, grace comes in and actually begins to heal those wounds of sin and to free us up so that we can actually choose the good, all right? But it doesn't constrain us as to which good we should choose. So let's say, the guy gets off of alcohol, he gets off his cocaine addiction or whatever. Now he's got all this free activity, all this sort of rational free action to make anything of his life that he wants. Well, do I want to take up the piano or the violin? Do I want to learn how to do oil painting or watercolors?
Yeah.
Do I want to marry this woman or that one? And it's all good. Grace doesn't constrain your choices. It opens them up, makes you have this much greater capacity to choose the good, to love God in a multifaceted ways. Okay, and the freest people of all, the freest rational agents of all, are the saints and the angels in heaven. And the most enslaved are the souls in hell.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the way grace works. Doesn't destroy or interfere with free will. In fact, it undergirds, enhances our free will. Now, with regard to your second question, how does God's justice play into this? Okay, well, first of all, as a matter of justice, not at all. If justice controlled, we'd all go to hell. All right, we don't get grace because we deserve it. All right? The gift of grace is a mercy. It's an act of God's mercy, not of his justice. Now, his justice does come into play because in his mercy, he makes us just. In his mercy, he makes us just, so that God's acceptance of us, while it's grounded and initiated in his mercy, is not unjust. It's not unjust because he heals us of our sin, forgives our sins, and in fact infuses his righteousness into us, so that the rewards he grants to us are themselves just, but only because he took the first initiative.
Okay. Tim, thank you so much for your call. That opens up a line for you now, 1-800-585-9396. If you have a question for Dr. David Anders about the Catholic faith, 1-800-585-9396. Let's go now to Josh in Temple, Texas, listening to us on Red Sea Radio. Hey, Josh, what's on your mind today?
Hi. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for taking my call, and I just want to tell you how much I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and I've learned so much by listening to your show.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you.
So I actually have two questions. The first being, I'm wondering what the Catholic Church's problems with Freemasonry are. As I understand it, the Church does have a stance on Freemasonry.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. So, first of all, Josh, the Catholic Church does not have a stance on individual Freemasons, So if I meet somebody who is a Freemason, I'm not bigoted against him as a person because he's a Freemason and I'm a Catholic. I'm open to friendship with that person. I'm open to love and mutual reciprocal respect and care and all the good things that can derive from human relationship. I want justice for that person. I want mercy for that person. I want human flourishing for that person. And I don't desire anything bad for that individual, whether he's a Freemason or not, or whatever his walk of life is, or whatever his religious tradition or background or circumstances, okay? We're not prejudiced against Freemasons, right? However, the organization known as Freemasonry historically set itself up in intentional, direct, subversive opposition to the Catholic Church. And this is part of the history of the society. One of the principal aims of Freemasonry historically has been to undercut and to subvert Catholic influence throughout society. All right, and you can see that even in the very architecture of the lodges. If you go around the United States and look at where Masonic lodges are located, especially the big ones, you'll find that they are very often placed, and intentionally so, in close proximity to Catholic buildings like cathedrals, or in particular to Jesuit houses of formation and study. That's not an accident. That's not an accident, because the formation of Freemasonry was, again, to try to provide a counterweight against Catholic influence in society and culture. Now, that aspect of Freemasonry may be somewhat remote from the mind of your average Freemason on the street, so to speak, and quite frankly, Catholic influence in society has diminished a great deal. So your average Freemason probably doesn't feel nearly as threatened by it as, say, a Freemason in 18th century France might have felt, when the Catholic Church was ubiquitous and pervasive throughout all of culture. Mm-hmm. Right? But nevertheless, that history lies there. All right? And embedded into the doctrines and ritual and oaths and secrecy of Freemasonry are specific philosophical positions that contradict Catholic dogmas. So that to acknowledge that is not to... You said, what do we have against Freemasonry? Let me reframe the question. Let me explain why Catholics can't be Freemasons. That's framing it slightly differently, all right? I mean, if somebody's a Freemason, I can like that guy and I can be his buddy, all right? But, my buddy Tom Price over here, who's a Catholic, I'm going to advise him not to become a Freemason. And the church says, actually, he can't become a Freemason because to do so would mean joining a society historically set up in opposition to the Catholic Church and whose doctrines and rituals specifically contradict Catholic dogmas, okay? Now, if someone is not a Catholic and they're a Freemason and they're a person of goodwill and they're acting sincerely and they're not there for evil motives, I'm not going to say anything against that particular individual, all right? I mean, he's a nice guy. I might want to be his buddy. But that's why Catholics can't be Freemasons.
Exactly. And you've mentioned one of the things on this program. You have mentioned that one thing that the Freemasons advocate is indifferentism. Indifferentism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I remember the first time I ever entered a Masonic lodge in my life, I was in high school, and I went to the Grand Lodge in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it's a very important lodge in American history. It's got an august tradition and beautiful building and lots of ritual and symbolism and all kinds of monuments to famous Freemasons down through the centuries. And I remember we got a tour from some, uppity-up Mason who was way up the hierarchy. I don't remember what his rank was, but he was very proud of his history and heritage. And he explained to us, in that little tour, and I wasn't a Catholic at the time, how the doctrines of Freemasonry committed one to essentially to deism, to the doctrine that there is a God, but that which form of worship one adheres to in the recognition of that God is a thing indifferent, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, doesn't matter if you're a Protestant, doesn't matter if you're a Catholic, doesn't matter if a Hindu, as long as you're a theist, as long as you're a deist, you believe in the one God. And that's Catholics think it really does matter how you know and worship God.
Sure.
All right. I'd rather somebody be a theist than be an atheist.
Yeah.
But among theists, it matters that one follow the Christian religion as founded by Jesus.
Absolutely. Josh, is that helpful for you?
Yes, that does answer that. I did just want to say, speaking as a Freemason, we leave a man's faith up to his own. But the second question that I wanted to ask you about pertains to the Lord's Prayer. I've noticed that whenever I hear the prayer being recited on Red Sea Radio, I do not hear, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever." Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So we actually find the Lord's Prayer enumerated twice in sacred Scripture, and there's a longer ending to the prayer and a shorter ending to the prayer that leaves out that second part. In the Catholic liturgical recitation of the Lord's Prayer, there's actually a little interlude, and then the priest intones the second half. All right, but in private devotion, the tradition going back for 2,000 years within Catholicism is to recite the shorter version.
Okay. Josh, thank you so much for your question. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. Our phone number, 1-800-585-9396, 1-800-585-9396. Heather is watching us right now on YouTube. She says, was Bethlehem the town where the sacrificial lambs were cared for? And also, have you heard of Migdal Elder, I believe is what that is. Micah 4:8 is the reference there, as the alleged exact location in Bethlehem where Christ was born.
Okay, so I know absolutely nothing about ancient Hebrew agriculture or animal husbandry.
Okay.
So I think from my general knowledge of Old Testament, I think that it's unlikely that the sacrificial lambs came only from one city. All right, because worshipers from all over Israel would bring their sacrifices and offerings to the temple in Jerusalem.
Sure,
right.
Sure.
But I'll tell you who's much better on Holy Land geography and Old Testament than I am, and that's Father Mitch Pacwa, who's on Open Line on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's right.
He's the man on Holy Land geography. He's been over there, the Holy Land, like umpteen zillion times. He leads pilgrimage tours, and he also speaks Hebrew and Arabic, which I'm not into. So
yeah.
He'd be better on that. But that doesn't sound right to me. But again, I'm going to defer to the expert.
Okay. What about the second part of that?
Nope. I'm drawing a blank. Sorry.
Okay. Well, then that's where we'll leave it. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. Our phone number, 1-800-585-9396. Here's a quick one here from CS watching us on YouTube. How can we claim the sacrifice of Christ as ours? Was it a gift to us?
Ooh, what a great question. Oh, in several ways. Okay, so first of all, in biblical culture, the idea of a representative is much more intelligible than it is in modern America.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you remember the story of King David when he's a boy, and Israel is fighting the Philistines, and Goliath comes out, the champion of the Philistines, and he says, "I'm gonna, you call out your champion, I'll chop his head off, but if he chops my head off, then we'll serve you, and if I chop his head off, then you guys serve us." And so rather than the whole armies going to war, they agreed, well, yeah, we can do this thing. We can have our representative go out and represent the whole nation. And, of course, David does, and he takes out Goliath with the sling. That's a common idea, right? there's a sense of corporate solidarity. You know, when the Northern Kingdom broke away after Rehoboam, all right, what they said was, we have no share in David. When they rebelled against the Southern Kingdom, they said, we're not leaving the kingdom of Judea. We're leaving David. We have no share in David nor in David's son. That idea of being sort of corporately represented in the body of the king, common Hebrew idea. And so when it's not just a representative reality, though, within the Christian church, because through baptism, we actually become members of Christ's body, mystically conjoined to him, so that in a real sense, we die and rise with him as he offers himself on the cross. St. Paul says, through the agency of the Holy Spirit, we die with him, our old man is done away with, and we rise again with him to new life. I'd like to say more, but here comes the music.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. CS, thank you so much for your question. We'll be back in a moment here with Aaron, also Tim, and hopefully you as well. 1-800-585-9396 here on Call to Communion. Stay with us.
Most reality TV leaves out half of reality, the faith that drives us from within. We're giving you the whole picture, real life and faith.
Chris Stefanik is on a journey to uncover the bold, courageous Catholic faith found in the hearts of people all over the world. Meet the everyday Catholics who inspire him as they show the world how amazing faith makes everyday life. Real Life Catholic, Tuesday at 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN TV.
And welcome to EWTN's Bookmark Brief. I'm Doug Keck. I just finished an interview with Jimmy Akin on his new book, The Drama of Salvation, How God Rescues You from Your Sins and Brings You to Eternal Life. Give us some highlights of what this book is about, Jimmy.
Well, basically, The Drama of Salvation covers the most important subject in practical terms that all of us will ever face, namely, how are we saved? It's a subject that's going to determine where we spend eternity, whether we spend eternity with God in heaven or banished from his presence in hell. It's a subject that has eternal consequences, and that's what this book is about. It goes through the teaching of the Bible, it goes through the teaching of the Church Fathers, and it talks about the different perspectives on this subject that you find in American Protestantism and how to respond to those from a Catholic point of view.
Thank you so much. The one and only Jimmy Akin from Catholic Answers fame. The book is The Drama of Salvation. Look for the book on EWTNRC.com, and thank you for joining us here on EWTN's Bookmark Brief.
I'm Lisa Poptek with More to Life. Advent is the time to reflect on how God took time out of the busiest schedule in the universe to be present to us. This Advent, take some time to make more time to be with the people you love. Make Christ present in your home by being more present. Let God's love be incarnate in the way you attend to the people you care about, and let them know that the most important thing you have to do is spend time with them.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? This is Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. 1-800-585-9396.
Great radio straight ahead here on EWTN at 3 p.m. It is Open Line Tuesday, and we've got a great program for you. It will be Janet Morana, another pro-life warrior. She'll be here to answer your questions regarding life issues. Do check that out today at 3 p.m. Eastern, EWTN's Open Line Tuesday. At 4, it's Cresta in the afternoon, and then tonight at 6 Eastern Time, Catholic Answers Live. It's an open forum Q&A with Tim Staples and Jim Blackburn. Now, here's what I really am excited about, and that is tonight on Mother Angelica Live Classics, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television. Mother has for us a Christmas message. When we look at the baby Jesus, we get to see the value of life because the Word became flesh. Tonight, Mother shares an inspiring reflection on the meaning of Christmas. Do check that out tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television. Back to the phones we go at 1-800-585-9396. Tim is in Harrison, Michigan, listening to us on Good Shepherd Radio. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I work with someone that, I'll state off the bat, I'm Protestant, I'm not Catholic.
Okay.
But the guy that I work with, he's neither. And he said there's no historical evidence of Jesus ever existing, except for what you find in the Bible or in scriptures. Are there any records outside of scriptures of Jesus?
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. So, first of all, there are the writings of the Christian Church fathers of the 2nd century, the apostolic fathers, who knew the apostles firsthand. We have Roman and Jewish sources like Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny, Trajan, the Roman emperor. We have evidence from the Talmud, which is a Jewish source, the writings of Josephus, the Jewish historian. We also have the oral and liturgical tradition of early Christianity, which is outside of the New Testament. But I would also like to suggest that to discount the New Testament evidence for the existence of Jesus is just absolutely absurd. It's just absolutely absurd. It would be like saying, is there any evidence for Julius Caesar's existence other than his own writings? You know, I mean, like, why would you discount the evidence that's closest to the historical record, composed by the people that knew Christ the best? All right, and you know, it's like saying there's no evidence for Plato outside of Plato's writings. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
I was just thinking, one of our very first affiliates on the radio side was Portland, Oregon. I have never been to Portland, Oregon, but I know that it exists and that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, I mean, when you read the New Testament evidence, I mean, first of all, the New Testament writers, you know, they don't present themselves as composing myth. All right, or legend. I mean, like the Gospel of St. Luke, for instance. I mean, Luke says, you know, I determined to make an accurate account of the things that took place, and therefore I did my historical research and interviewed witnesses and looked at documents. And I mean, he depicts himself as a historian engaged in a process of critical reasoning here, and it's telling, in fact, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all give slightly different and sometimes extraordinarily different accounts of the life of Jesus, all right? And that actually counts in favor of their historical reliability, because if they were just recounting, you know, some archetypal myth that had been derived from paganism or something, then they wouldn't vary in those details in the way they do precisely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Of course, the areas in which they agree have led most scholars of the documents to the conclusion that the three synoptic gospel writers in particular are drawing from an earlier oral tradition. All right, and of course the gospel documents themselves are very early. I mean, they're very early documents. The oral tradition that they're drawing on is even earlier. All right,
wow.
And so you can do good work on the question of the reliability of the New Testament documents as history. There's a good book on the subject by the Protestant scholar F.F. Bruce. It's simply called The New Testament Documents, Are They Reliable? All right. And, you know, there are all kinds of avenues to look at this. I mean, Christ, of course, taught in Aramaic. The New Testament documents were composed in Greek. Some scholars have gone back and taken Jesus' sayings and tried to translate them back into Aramaic to see what they might have looked like when he actually pronounced them, and found evidence of rhyme scheme and rhythm and meter and things like that were suggestive of the way in which rabbis would teach their disciples in a way that would be easily committed to memory.
Wow.
You know, when you consider the way in which an oral culture passes down information, then the gap between the historical Christ and the record of those oral traditions is very, very short. I mean, given that ancient cultures were much more given to committing things to memory and passing them down in that way. You know, the fact of the origin of the Christian church itself, I mean, undeniably the Christian church exists. Undeniably it took its origin in the first century. Undeniably it took its origin from something. And everybody that we have access to in all of their writings tells us manifestly, we got this from this dude named Jesus, okay? And, you know, it had to get off the ground somewhere, right? And the idea that the apostles and the early Christians were subject to some sort of mass delusion, and that they imagined the existence of a historical character that nobody else saw, and all died the death of martyrdom in Testament. Why would the Talmud, why would Jewish sources from the time be so bent out of shape against Jesus and try to impugn him and cast aspersions on his reputation if he didn't exist? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, at all. Tim, thank you so much for your call. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. 1-800-585-9396 is our number. Get back to the phones in a second here. Looks like Kathleen. Kathleen is watching us on YouTube. Kathleen says, can you please list for us the mortal sins? God bless your good news.
Okay, thanks. Answer to that question is no. Okay, because it doesn't work that way. Okay. Let me reframe the question. What is a mortal sin? A mortal sin is a grave offense against God or human dignity.
Okay.
Okay. In how many ways could I offend Tom Price's dignity?
Quite a
Right?
few.
You remember the Monty Python fish slapping skit?
Oh, yes.
You know, a guy walks up and slaps you across the face with a fish. You know, if I hit you hard enough with a fish, that might be a mortal sin. Right? You know, if I curse you, that might bad enough, ruin your reputation. That might be a mortal sin. If I cheat you, that might be a mortal sin. I mean, the number of ways I could offend against your dignity are nigh unto infinite. All right. So the better way of framing it is what are the goods that I should revere, that I should protect, that I should value, that I should live for? Well, love, justice, truth, but essentially God and people. Love God above all things.
Sure.
Love your neighbor as yourself. When you deflect from those two ends, in a sufficiently grave way, you've fallen into mortal sin. Okay. And there's probably an infinite number of ways you can fall into that. Now, there are another way of framing it is what are the wounds, what are the temptations that typically lead people into mortal sins? And these are what we call the capital sins. Okay, and I'm going on about 2 hours of sleep last night, so I'm probably going to forget, if I try to give you a list, right, I'm going to forget some of them. But basically, the biggie, of course, is pride.
Sure.
Okay? Now, pride can lead you to do all kinds of bad stuff. It can lead you to lie. It can lead you to cheat. You know, all kinds of, it can lead you to become a tyrant, become a megalomaniac. I mean,
We've seen that in
lots
history.
of bad things can come. Not just one sin can flow from it. Lust. Ooh, that's a biggie.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Gold, guns, and girls, as my dad used to say, are kind of the three big ones.
Okay.
Avarice, so greed,
sure,
anger, believe it or not, sloth. I'm just absolutely not going to get out of bed. I'm not going to do my duty. I mean, you can be mortally sinful, mortally guilty of sloth if you have some serious duty that you neglect because it's just too much trouble to do otherwise.
Yeah.
What am I missing here?
We got a lot of them.
Okay, that's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Gluttony. Gluttony, that's another one. One that I'm particularly given to, especially around the holiday season.
You and me both.
So these aren't a list of all the sins that you can commit, but they're the typical wounds of our nature that will lead us into gross deflection from the love of God and neighbor.
Okay, very good. Kathleen, thank you for watching us today on YouTube. We hope that's helpful for you. Call to Communion in progress here on EWTN. Our phone number 1-800-585-9396. We'll get to Aaron in just a moment and also Frank in Buffalo. Right now, I want to tell you about something that I enjoy seeing in my email inbox each and every Thursday, and that is Wings. It's an email newsletter from EWTN. You can stay up to date on the latest EWTN TV and radio shows. You can find out about books and art and CDs, DVDs from a religious catalog, also blogs and bookmark EWTN's program, news, special events, and it's absolutely free. You can sign up for Wings, our weekly e-newsletter, by going to EWTN.com. Look for the little box that says Wings. You click on that, put in your email address, and boom, you'll start getting it each and every Thursday, sometimes Friday, occasionally Wednesday, but generally Thursday. So do check that out, EWTN.com for Wings. Let's go to one of my favorite cities in the whole wide world, Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and Aaron, listening to us on Covenant Radio. Aaron, what's on your mind today?
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I am calling from an Eastern Orthodox perspective, and my call is in regards to the Nicene Creed. We say that Jesus will come again to judge the living and the dead. And my understanding of the Roman Catholic position is that at death, you would undergo the particular judgment. You would the damned would go to hell, the saints would go to heaven for the beatific vision, and the rest would go to purgatory. And so my question would be, how can he judge the dead if the judgment has already taken place?
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. So, of course, the book of Hebrews tells us that it is appointed for a man once to die and then to face judgment. Okay, so the doctrine of the particular judgment is a biblical doctrine, but the particular judgment differs from the general judgment in this, that in the general judgment, God is vindicated in the sphere, the public sphere in which he was dishonored. So St. Paul says that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. The manifestation of the gospel is a public event. All right, the reconciliation of the world doesn't pertain just to our individual or interior lives, but to our community, the society of God's faithful, that is the church. All right, and part of the glorification of heaven is that the righteous will shine like the stars of heaven or like the sun, that they will be manifest as such, and that the righteous will be vindicated in the face of the wicked. In particular, those that suffered persecution will stand justified and vindicated before those that put them to death. So that public manifestation of the justice of God is important to the supernatural and to the order and to the order of justice. All right. Nevertheless, let's say you're one of those souls that's martyred. All right. Well, you actually participate in the beatific vision immediately upon death, but in a disembodied state. We haven't experienced the resurrection of the body yet. All right. And St. Paul says that we will be as if naked and longing to be clothed. All right. Looking forward to the resurrection from the dead. All right. So you go to the beatific vision, you enjoy the presence of God, but at the second coming of Christ, the dead are raised, the souls of the just are reunited with their physical bodies, and then at the general judgment, it's not for the just, for the righteous, this is not a fearful time. This is a time when they're publicly vindicated in the eyes of all those who had previously despised them.
Is that helpful for you, Aaron?
Yes, it is. Just a little bit of clarification. So it's in some ways it's a further degree of glorification and experience that they've already experienced after the particular judgment?
The general judgment is accompanied by the resurrection of the dead. Okay? Now, when we talk about degrees of glory, I want to be hesitant about talking about degrees of glory. I'll talk about qualities of glory. Mm-hmm. All right? Because I can't conceive of the degree of glory accompanying the beatific vision of the saints in heaven. All right? But that's a kind of glory that, of course, is not visible to the created order.
Yeah.
All right? But the bodies of the resurrected dead will be luminescent and glorified, even as Christ's resurrected body was luminescent and glorified. And that'll be a glory that's manifested to the world.
Aaron, thank you so much for your call. This is Call to Communion here on EWTN. We have a line open for you right now, 1-800-585-9396, 1-800-585-9396. Let's go now to Ben, who's watching us on Facebook. His question, Dr. Anders, during your conversion, what was your most difficult Catholic doctrine to get past?
You know, that's a good question. I think the hardest doctrine, not necessarily the hardest doctrine conceptually to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Okay. But for me, the doctrine of justification was like pulling a cork out of the bottle.
Really?
Like once that one, came out, everything else started to flow like mad. All right, because the whole logic of the Catholic system, the sacramental life, the ecclesial structure, the moral teachings, everything hangs on our understanding of the nature of salvation. And of course, as a Protestant growing up, I had always been taught that the Catholics do all kinds of things wrong. But man, what they really get wrong is the nature of salvation. And Luther himself, Luther wrote a book in 1525 called On the Bondage of the Will.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of that book, he was writing to Erasmus of Rotterdam. At the end of that book, Luther said, many people want to portray my Reformation as if it were about indulgences and purgatory and the papacy and all this kind of trash. He says these things are trifles, not worthy of debate.
Really?
That's what he said. That's what he said. He says the real meat of the thing is whether or not we can cooperate with God's grace, whether or not we have free will. Luther, of course, said no. He said we don't cooperate with God's grace. We don't have free will. The Catholic Church says yes. Right? That goes straight to the heart of the nature of salvation. Luther didn't say it, but he's often credited with saying that the doctrine of justification is the article on which the church stands or falls.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and even though he didn't utter those words, that's a pretty good summary of his basic position. Right, everything else is just peanuts compared to the significance of justification. Once you get that question right, as a Catholic, everything else tends to follow. So that's where my biggest emotional hurdle was, not my biggest conceptual hurdle, I think. Once I understood what Scripture and sacred tradition and teaching authority of the Church taught on the nature of salvation, then everything else began to fall like dominoes.
Fascinating. Some people say it is the Pope. Can't get past the idea of this Pope who is infallible. Well, maybe they don't understand what we're talking about when we use the word infallibility. Or Mary. Some people just can't get past Our Lady.
Well, I'll tell you that the idea of venerating saints and their relics was not as conceptually difficult for me to grasp, all right, but it was emotionally a lot harder because I had always been told growing up that to pray to saints is an act of idolatry. And even after I figured out intellectually that was not true, I mean, I remember the first time I actually ever prayed to a saint, it was Therese of Lisieux.
Really?
And I was just terrified. I was worried that God was going to strike me dead, for doing it. Seriously, And I've met other Protestants that have had the same experience. They just couldn't get over it. And even when they become intellectually convinced that this is the right thing to do, and I literally said, Saint Therese, I'm not even sure about this kind of stuff, but this is an experiment. I'm going to try this out. If I'm supposed to become Catholic, let me know. Signing off, David Anders.
Yeah.
And then she did.
I remember that.
She did. She sent me a very, very, very clear sign that my prayer had been answered and that I was to become Catholic.
Very cool. And that's also one of the common misconceptions that we run across on this program, sometimes other programs here on EWTN.
You know what the last thing I considered was in my conversion to the Catholic faith?
What?
The papacy.
Really?
It was like the last piece of the puzzle.
Wow.
And when I finally got around to looking at the papacy, I said, okay, what's the papacy's job description? All right. Papacy's job description is not to get on airplanes and fly around the world and give cool talks at youth congresses, even though that's a nice thing popes do.
It is.
All right.
Yes.
But even if they didn't do that, his job wouldn't go away. Job of the papacy is to be the guarantor of the church's orthodoxy, right? To stand there and be the point of unity in Catholic doctrine, to hand on the faith faithfully down through the centuries. And I knew that we've had saintly popes and we've had some real humdingers too.
Oh yeah.
Okay. But I said, okay, in spite of good popes, bad popes, wise pope, foolish popes, young popes, old popes, crazy popes, sane popes, has the institution done its job? And I said, yeah, it has.
Very
it
good.
has. It did what God set it up to do.
We have time for one more phone call here. If you want to give us a call, 1-800-585-9396, 1-800-585-9396. Andy's checking us out on YouTube right now. Andy says, how can children and people, including non-Catholics visiting, get the most out of the Mass?
Okay, thank you. I think the answer is different for children and non-Catholics visiting, okay, and for Catholics. So let me start with Catholics, with adult baptized, believing Catholics.
All right.
The most important thing to do to get the most out of the Mass is to understand that the Mass is a sacrificial act of worship ordered to God, pointing to God, directed to God. It is not a real presence manufacturing facility for the purpose of handing me Holy Communion.
Right.
All right. Many Catholics view it that way. They're like, gonna go get my communion. All right. That's important. Receiving Holy Communion is important, but it is the culmination, it is the end of an entire sacrificial act of worship, okay? And the Second Vatican Council wrote about this in Sacrosanctum Concilium and said that the people need to be taught to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass along with the ministerial priest, and then to offer themselves along with it, sanctified by the sacrifice of Christ. Okay. Now, if you come to the Mass with that disposition, St. Paul says, offer your bodies as living sacrifices. This is your spiritual act of worship. If I come to the Mass with the disposition that I'm here to offer myself to God, and that my offering is acceptable because it is joined to the offering of Christ, present there on the altar, all right, so that I need to die and rise with Him in imitation of His self-sacrifice, all right, And I believe that the Holy Spirit is active in the Mass to conjoin my life, to configure my life to the sacred action of Christ in the sacred liturgy, right? Then it doesn't matter, really doesn't matter how good is the homily, how much did I like the music, did the guy next to me have squeaky boots or forget to put on his deodorant, all of the things that might kind of annoy me or impede my participation vanish into insignificance, and in fact, they may even become sacrifices that I can offer up. And then I receive Holy Communion, not as some kind of prize at the end that guarantees my salvation, which it doesn't, all right, but as the final culminating act in my sharing in this sacrifice of the altar, my participating in that, it becomes far more meaningful, all right? And I have to come with that attitude of conversion, of repentance, of faith, and of self-immolation, of self-offering. That's how Catholics need to go to Mass. And I would say also attend carefully to the words of the liturgy, all right? Not just to the readings and to the homily, but when we're praying the collect, when the priest is praying the Eucharistic prayer, pay attention. These prayers are powerfully edifying. Really dig in. Open your missalette. Read along. All right. The words of the liturgy are beautiful, and filled with doctrine and holiness. Okay. With children, depending on the age, I think the most important thing to inculcate in kids is, first of all, the virtue of reverence. All right. It goes without saying that depending on their age, they're going to be limited in what they understand and appreciate. But I think they can appreciate the idea of reverence. Okay.
Yeah.
And then of joy, that it is a great privilege to receive Christ in Holy Communion, to be present at Holy Mass, that we're entering into the divine presence of Christ. I mean, the whole idea of sacred space and the holy water and the genuflections, that we're standing before some awesome mystery. All right, that's something that kids can grasp, and then encourage them and reward them and praise them for their prayerful and their devout participation.
Yeah.
And then they'll grow in their understanding as time goes on. Now, with respect to non-Catholics, I think it's very important for non-Catholics not to assimilate the Mass to their non-Catholic Christian experience. I mean, and this is particularly true in sort of non-liturgical traditions, right? Sometimes, like a Baptist may come to Mass, and he's going to Mass with the same attitude he would bring to his Baptist worship service, which is, okay, what is the preacher going to say to me? That's like the most important thing in Baptist worship. What is the preacher going to say to me? And sometimes they're shocked in comparison. I mean, priests may get up there and give a 5 or 7 minute homily that doesn't even seem to necessarily be based in the text, or if it is, it's maybe only loosely based in the text, and it may even be kind of rambling or whatever. And he's used to a 45-minute exegetical, biblical expository sermon, and he walks away and says, "Well, I didn't get anything out of that." Well, of course you didn't, because you went expecting the wrong thing. If you understand what Catholics are there to do, namely to offer themselves to God in sacrifice along with the holy sacrifice of the Mass, all right, and the homily, though important, is really not the most important thing we're doing there. Yeah. I think they'll have a deeper appreciation for what's going on.
I think so. Make the main thing the main thing.
Make the main thing the main thing.
I often say, it's like a talking dog. If you have a talking dog, you don't quibble about sentence structure or verb usage. It's a talking dog. Go with that. David's thinking about that one.
I have pulled out some crazy analogies on this radio show in history, but I'm going to go home and tell my wife Tom Price compared the Mass to a talking dog.
Now wait a minute. Now come on now. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to Rosa in Kansas City, Larry in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Please call us back tomorrow, and we will get to you then. Dr. David Anders,
I really want to talk to Rosa tomorrow. If you could call back tomorrow, Rosa, we'd love to take that call.
Do that. I'm Tom Price.
And Larry, too. Don't want to leave out Larry.
Absolutely. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Call to Communion. God bless, and peaceful Advent to you.